Salutations, everypup, and welcome to Chapter 31 of The One They Call Broccoli by Texiliaz. As always, the link to the fic will be in the description below. And with that out of the way, let's jump on into it. Chapter 31, Nezu's Announcement. Chapter Summary. Izuku is happy being back in school and for things to go back to normal. Nezu has an announcement to make. Izuku is not a fan. The vestiges worry. Hikage takes things into his own hands, and Shota is frustrated with everything. Author's notes. Hello, everyone! This chapter was a mess, lol, but hopefully it turned out okay. It's also a bit longer than usual, so hopefully it was worth the wait. Thank you to Lukewarm Beef Stew for beta reading this chapter. You're a legend. Trigger warnings. Mentions of self-isolation, hints at/fear of suicide, panic attack. Let me know if I missed anything. Izuku's point of view. It was finally time for Izuku to go back to school. Logically, Izuku knew it had only been 1 week, but with everything that had happened, he couldn't help but feel like it had been months since he last saw his classmates. Everyone had been buzzing with energy and shared lots of exciting stories about their internships. It was a little sad that Izuku couldn't share his own experiences with his friends, but he also understood why it had to be kept a secret. That didn't mean his classmates didn't talk about Stain, though, which was a bit awkward, but thankfully not something they lingered on for too long. They had been in the middle of Asui retelling her mission when the classroom door opened and all of them quickly scrambled to their seats. But to their confusion, Aizawa didn't step inside the classroom. Instead, the man beckoned them to follow him, only stating that they had something to attend to. His classmates all shared a confused look and whispers, but no one dared to question their teacher as they quickly stood up to follow him outside. "Do you have any idea what's going on?" Todoroki asked, having stepped up to Izuku as they left the classroom and startling the green-haired boy. "No idea," Izuku answered with a shake of his head. He knew that his dads had been anxious after their teachers' meeting the other day. They had also spent hours in their room last night, and Broccoli had heard their muffled voices as they seemed concerned about something. It was a bit concerning how they apparently didn't want Broccoli to know about whatever it was that they had discussed. Hopefully no one was in any trouble. Around them, he could hear anxious murmurs from his classmates, who were wondering if this was going to be something like that physical exam the first day. But all of those worries soon disappeared when they all arrived at one of the gyms and were met with what looked to be every single class and staff member of UA. Up front was a large stage with a podium, where Izuku could see All Might and a few other teachers gathered. There was a buzzing energy around the gym, everyone wondering what was going on. And then, almost as soon as the last person entered the building, Nezu suddenly popped up from seemingly nowhere and stood behind the podium, smiling brightly as he did.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to our dear heroic students. I hope that you are all excited for another week here at our wonderful academy.
No one answered, though Izuku didn't expect anyone to. He could feel a smile stretch across his face at those words, because he was excited. Izuku was thrilled for everything to just go back to normal again, at least until their next internship in fall. But that was a worry for future him to deal with. For now, there were no more internships in other cities, no more crazy run-ins with villains, and most importantly, no more sharing his dads with any of his classmates. Just Izuku, the UA hero student by day, and Broccoli, the house cat, by night. Two identities that were kept nice and separated, as it should be.
We at UA always strive to give you students the best education and experience to grow. And so, I am proud to announce that UA will open up our very own dorm system,
Nezu exclaimed happily from the stage. Wait, what? There was a collective rise of murmurs and confused exclamations around him. But Izuku barely heard any of it, as he was too busy gaping at the principal and wondering if he had heard that correctly. But then the mammal kept telling them about the dorms, how every class would be assigned their own dorm with their homeroom teacher living there as well, and Izuku realized with horror that this was legit. They were actually gonna move into dorms? He didn't hear most of the speech after that, the static in his ears being too loud, as his whole body felt numb. Nor did he really listen or notice as his classmates gushed about this new exciting change, or how Todoroki and Shinso were shooting him worried looks while nudging him to move out of the stadium after the gathering was done. For hours, Izuku simply felt numb. He should probably be excited like his classmates, or heck, even stressed about moving, or angry, or anything, but instead, all he did was sit there, feeling completely drained as it felt like everything was crumbling around him. It wasn't until the end of the day, after most of the students had left, and Izuku sat quietly out in the schoolyard, watching as machines were driving around and building what would be their new home, that he felt the first flicker of an actual emotion. Anger. Izuku didn't often turn to anger, but right now, he felt furious. Because why would Nezu just decide something like this? He knows that Shota and Toshinori will be forced to move into UA, along with Izuku himself. He doesn't want to share a space with his classmates, with a whole school. He doesn't want any of this. He just wants his family to stay in their little apartment and to just feel safe. And now Nezu wants to take that away from him? Why? Without even realizing it, Izuku had already stood up and was heading back into the school building to the principal's office. His mentor had some explaining to do. Nezu's point of view. If you were to ask Nezu, today had been fairly successful. Getting the dorms approved had been a long and hard fought battle, but he had finally managed to get the approval from the higher ups. He felt happy with himself and with his accomplishment. If they were lucky, the dorms should be ready to move into by the end of next week. Now here he was, basking in the warmth of the sunset, happily sipping his tea and watching the construction of the first UA student dorms from the comfort of his office. There was just one thing missing, though. Nezu-sensei! A sharp voice called out, accompanied with the slam of his office door hitting the wall. Ah, there it is, Nezu thought, barely able to resist the way his snout twitched into a smile. He calmly set his teacup down and turned around to see his red-faced little grandpup and personal student, Izuku, who was currently glaring at him. The pup was standing rigid in the doorway, breathing heavily and face twisted in an angry snarl. If he had a tail in this humanoid form, Nezu was sure that it would be twitching violently behind him. Nezu knew he was meant to look threatening, but it was honestly adorable. It was just too cute how the young pup had yet to learn how to properly conceal his emotions. It reminded Nezu a lot of both a younger version of himself and of a younger Shota, who was Nezu's pup in all but blood. Shota especially had always had quite the temper. Oh, how fun it was to see how similar the boy is to his father sometimes. Shaking his head, Nezu turned back to the situation at hand.
Good evening, Izuku. To what do I owe the pleasure? What a pleasant surprise, he greeted, taking joy in how the boy looked even more frustrated at his calm greeting. It was truly moments like this that reminded Nezu of just how close Izuku was to his animal side. Sure, he may have been born human, but it had always been clear that his quirk affected him more than he tried to let on. Why did you decide to move us into dorms? Izuku demanded, cutting straight to the chase. So impatient, Nezu thought, with a quiet chuckle and an amused twitch of his tail. Now, Izuku, is that any way to greet your mentor? Why don't we just sit down and talk over a cup of tea? After all, I am curious about your experience during your internship. The pup looked ready to argue, a growl emitting from low in his throat. But then he stumbled slightly to the side with a hiss, holding his ear and glaring at the empty air next to him. Nezu watched with interest as it seemed the vestiges had
pulled his ear. It seems like Izuku isn't the only one who's gotten stronger. That thought sent a shiver of interest down Nezu's back. There really were no limits to how far this particular pup would be able to go. If they managed to help him grow properly, that is, which Nezu was determined to do. Starting with the dorms and hopefully getting him to stop this silly game of living a double life that he had, in Nezu's opinion, been playing for far, far too long. After a tense moment, where the pup had been glaring at thin air, Izuku's shoulders slumped with defeat, and he reluctantly sat down on one of the couches in the office. Fine, let's talk, the boy grumbled, crossing his arms over his chest and looking about as threatening as a small kitten. But you have a lot of explaining to do. I won't talk or answer any of your questions unless you answer mine first. Deal? A wave of pride hit Nezu, and he gave the pup an encouraging smile.
Why, of course! I will answer any of your questions to the best of my abilities, as long as you promise to do the same, the mammal said cheerfully, as he handed Izuku a cup of tea. Now, what is it you wish to know?
Why are you really building the dorms? Izuku asked, voice filled with suspicion as he eyed Nezu as the teacup clenched between his scarred hands.
It is just as I stated earlier today. I wish to create a safe environment for all of my students where they can learn and grow as a dorm system, and a dorm system where the students can live on campus is an excellent step in the right direction,
Nezu answered truthfully as he settled on the couch next to his student. No, I mean, why now? Izuku bit out, sounding frustrated as he scowled.
Is there a reason why now is a bad time?
Nezu asked innocently, with a tilt of his head. He had to fight back a smile. The pup was just too easy to read. Oh, come on, you know why. It's the middle of the semester, it's weird. You can't tell me this has nothing to do with Stain or with... The pup trailed off, suddenly looking embarrassed as he looked away and curled into himself. Or? Nezu pressed, but not unkindly. Izuku swallowed, green and nervous eyes glancing up at Nezu. Or me. Nezu, did you do this because of me? With a sigh and a shake of his head, Nezu put down his teacup and answered,
Oh my dear little pup, you need to learn that not everything revolves around you, and once you accept that, you will be much more at peace.
At that, Izuku blushed before he could answer. Nezu continued, not unkindly.
That being said, I do admit that you are part of why this project was pushed forward. I have tried getting the dorm system approved for a long while, and when it was once again rejected, I had first planned to wait another semester or two before bringing it back up with the school board. But considering the attack of the hero killer, as well as concerningly high number of students this year that come from troubling homes, it was finally approved.
While speaking, Nezu was watching the pup closely for any reaction, and as soon as he mentioned the more students coming from difficult situations, the boy had tensed and looked away with a guilty expression.
It seems you know something about that?
Nezu questioned with a tilt of his head. Well, it's not my story to tell, the boy said hesitantly. But, so you know about my classmate? Classmate, Nezu thought. So he didn't know there were more than one? Or at least nothing as threatening as what that one was going through.
Ah, yes! I do know about Todoroki's unfortunate upbringing. I do keep track of every camera around the school during the sports festival, after all.
He paused, taking a sip of his tea before adding,
And I have to admit that my interest was piqued when Endeavor's son decided to drag you away from the others that day. It made me curious what he might have wanted with you, which is why I decided to listen in.
At that, Izuku's expression turned into an odd mix of horrified and furious. So, you knew about the abuse? And yet you still approved his internship with him? For a moment, Nezu felt his smile fade into something sad before he caught himself and stared and straightened up once again. That pup is very stubborn, much like yourself. So yes, I approved it, simply because I had no legal reason not to. Even if Todoroki would tell his story to the whole world, it would not do much against the number 2 hero. Not at this stage, at least. He would only be in more danger should the truth come out while he is in Endeavor's custody, and no help could be provided. So that's why you're making the dorms? To get him away from his father without raising any suspicion? Izuku asked quietly, a thoughtful look on his face. Precisely, Nezu chirped, with a clap of his paws. He was proud of his student for catching on so quickly. After all, I can only truly help those that are on my school grounds. But what happens outside of these walls, I do not have as much power over. The dorms are simply a quick and neutral solution that would take the pups away from their abusers, or their less than fortunate living conditions, without raising any suspicions or singling anyone out. It gives me more stable grounds to work on helping them escape and get back on their feet. It was sad, really. Nezu was very capable in bringing down entire schools or organizations, but when it came to children being abused by the very people who claimed they belonged to them because of something as foolish as blood or DNA, there just wasn't much he could do. This was sadly the best he could offer the pups at this moment in time. Izuku looked thoughtful, and Nezu couldn't help but smile as he watched that information sink in. He knew it would take more time before the pup truly understood how this would benefit him and his father's too. But for now, Nezu was just happy if he could make this selfless pup accept the dorms if it meant helping his fellow students. I guess I can understand that, Izuku sighed, not sounding happy at all. But still, I just... You find it unfair that I decided to move your whole family into the same dorm as your class? Nezu said gently, with another tilt of his head. Izuku flinched back, proving he had hit the nail on the head. Yes! Why would you do that when you know about our situation? Things are good the way they are. Besides, Shota and Toshinori would have to reveal the relationship if they lived together in the dorm. It just doesn't make any sense. Can't another teacher live in the 1A dorm? Legally speaking, Shota Aizawa and Yaki Toshinori are both married, and on paper, Yaki Toshinori is the secretary here at UA. That is no secret. As long as no one finds out that Toshinori and All Might are the same person, then they are both fine with revealing their relationship to other staff and students, Nezu pointed out. Besides, having Shota be the only homeroom teacher living off campus or in a separate dorm would certainly look more suspicious. But still, the boy trailed off as he curled into himself. Hypothetically speaking, what would it look like if you lived in the dorm but your family stayed back home, which is the case of your classmates, might I add? Izuku's head immediately shot up and he stared at Nezu in disbelief. What? That wouldn't happen. And why is that? Nezu asked, curious of the pup's reasoning. Because I am not leaving them to live on campus, Izuku bit out. I'm staying with them. I will always choose them. You can't force me away from my own family. I am not forcing you to do anything. I am merely asking you to consider how that would work for you. Can you really see yourself continuing this after you eventually move away from home? If not the dorm, then somewhere else after you graduate. Would you continue to live with your fathers like you are doing now? Would you work as a pro hero only to come home and live in solitude under the same roof as them while pretending you are nothing more than their cat? Where's all this coming from? Izuku asked, looking suspicious. While Nezu had been talking, the pup had put his teacup down and sat up straighter. His whole body was tense. as if he was ready to bolt at any second. Not that Nezu blamed him. After all, Nezu had never pressed Izuku on this matter before. But after many long talks with Sorahiko, he felt like it was long overdue.
I had a few interesting conversations with Gran Torino during both during and after your internship,
Nezu hummed, watching the pup carefully.
He seemed to worry that you are neglecting your human side.
At that, Izuku flinched hard. I'm not.
And I honestly agree,
Nezu continued, cutting the pup off before he could ramble out some form of excuse.
Personally, this has never bothered me before. Human or cat, both are animals, and as long as no harm falls on the pup, then it is fine. But it has come to my attention that there are certain emotional needs that a human child might have that your fathers have failed to provide for you.
They're not neglecting me.
Intentionally,
Nezu added calmly.
They are not neglecting you intentionally. But am I not correct to assume that they don't know the truth about all of your needs? What about talking or sharing your troubles? They've done a great job in giving you food, shelter, and love. But when it comes to human interactions, both me and Hound Dog, and now even Gran Torino, who you only stayed with for a few days, agree that you are stunted socially compared to your peers. You've lived isolated for too long, and I honestly believe that living among humans, as a human, will be good for you.
Why now? Izuku asked, quietly, voice barely above a whisper.
I already told you the amount of children you this year and with staying.
No! I mean, why now? The pup cried out, his voice cracking. Why didn't you do this months ago? Why haven't you told them the truth if you're this worried about me? I don't need this. I needed to stay with them, and yet you are taking them away from me while telling me how it's for my own good? It doesn't make any sense. Why are you doing this now? The pup growled out, eyes shining with unshed tears.
Would any answer really satisfy you?
Nezu asked, watching the distressed puff carefully.
I could say I never acted on it because I had no reason to worry about your safety. Or it could be because I was simply curious how long it would take them to find out.
Nezu watched the pup carefully as he spoke. His student wasn't looking at him, his gaze firmly locked on the floor, while his shoulders shook with the effort not to cry. The mammal continued to speak.
I could also say that I now see how things have gone too far, and how I now regret my decision to not do more to help you all those months ago after I first found out about your situation. But in truth, there is no simple answer. I am simply choosing to help you now because that's what a hero should do.
He finished speaking, voice firm yet not unkind. Please don't do this. Izuku wheezed out, his hands clutching at his chest. I'm really sorry for going off and fighting Stain. I'm sorry for not listening to Gran Torino. I'm sorry for everything. Just please don't take them away from me. The kid was crying now, breaths coming out short and desperate as he seemed to be falling into a bad panic attack. Nezu slowly moved closer to his student, before gently reaching up and ruffling his hair with one paw. Izuku didn't even seem to notice, his eyes closed and face pinched in pain as he clutched at his chest. But he did lean into the touch, so Nezu kept petting him.
I am not, nor will I ever tear you away from your family,
the mammal said, voice filled with conviction.
I know that change can be scary, but this is a good thing for all of you. You will see.
It won't. It won't be. It won't. It won't. Please, Nezu. Please don't do this. Izuku sobbed, curling further into himself and shaking his head frantically.
It will be,
Nezu reassured him, letting the pup curl up and bury his face against his shoulder as he cried.
You'll be all right, pup. You will still have your dads and your sister right here, and both Hound Dog and I will be able to support you too. I will not force you to tell anyone the truth about your quirk or your identity, but even so, I am positive that this change will help you grow into the hero you want to be.
He didn't get an answer to that, nor did he really expect to. Either Izuku simply kept crying his little heart out, curling into himself further before he, with a cloud of smoke, turned into his cat form. The cat quickly leapt up into Nezu's lap and pressed his head against Nezu's stomach. He was still crying, though much more quiet now that he lost his human vocal cords. Nezu kept running his paw down his back as he held his little grandpup close. Even though Nezu knew why this was necessary, it still hurt seeing the young pup so distressed. Eventually, Broccoli's breathing had slowed down, and it was only then that Nezu realized that the pup had fallen asleep curled up on his lap. Poor thing must have exhausted himself. With a sigh, Nezu glanced around the room and let out a quiet, "Please, take care of him!" And although he couldn't see them, he still felt a slight shift in the air, and he felt comforted by the fact that his grandpup would never be alone. And that's a wrap on the first half of chapter 31. That's right, I'm doing halves. So there's a story behind this. I read the entire chapter, but the audio was so glitchy in the it wasn't just in the beginning either. It was in the middle too with the fic. And so I had to reread this fic. This chapter was an hour long. And I'm sorry, but I can't read another hour of it. So it's getting split into two parts. So we have the first part here, and then we'll have the second part tomorrow, and then we'll move on to chapter 32 on Friday. So I hope you guys enjoy. Please go show the original author Texiliaz some love. Please leave me a comment, specifically a hate comment, because I like that and I'm weird. Shout out to Tetra B6V for being the only person to leave me a hate comment on my last chapter. Thank you. I appreciate you. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye, pups.